Hello and welcome to Coast AM's official YouTube channel. I'm your host, George Norrie. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And you can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and of course, on coasttocoastam.com. From the City of Angels, near the Pacific Ocean, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm George Norrie, and welcome to Coast AM. Later on tonight, Ghosts of Country Music. Ooh, get ready for that. By the way, Mel Gibson had to cancel his first-hour appearance tonight on the program. He had to run off to Boston. We will reschedule. Looking forward to talking to him. Darn. Here's what's happening. President Donald Trump has signed a new executive order placing a 90-day ban on people from 6 mainly Muslim nations. Iraq, which was covered in the previous 7-nation order, has been removed from the new one after agreeing to additional visa vetting measures. This directive, which includes a 120-day ban on all refugees, takes effect on March 16th. The previous order, which was blocked by a federal court, sparked confusion at airports and mass protests. Presented as a means to strengthen national security against terror threats, it was blocked by the courts and effectively remains on hold. Continuing a pattern of provocative actions, Iran this weekend test-fired a pair of ballistic missiles and then sent fast attack vessels close to a U.S. Navy ship in the Strait of Hormuz. Not smart. And North Korea was practicing to strike American military bases in Japan with its latest barrage of missile testing. Leader Kim Jong-un presided over the launches, feasting his eyes on the trails of ballistic rockets. The report from the Korean Central News Agency said, in language that will only heighten tensions in the region. The 4 ballistic missiles fired Monday morning, launched by a military unit tasked to strike the bases of U.S. forces in Japan. Now, the United States has numerous military bases in Japan as part of its post-war security alliance with that country. And, of course, Japan moved to the highest possible alert level after North Korea fired those 4 ballistic missiles. 3 of the missiles fell into what is called Japan's exclusive economic zone, one dropping about 350 kilometers west of the nation in the ocean. Charles R. Smith, an expert on Korea with us. Charlie, I feel something's going to happen. This can't continue.
Well, it certainly is starting to reach a peaking point here. The latest information is that the North Koreans have imposed a travel ban on all Malaysians, and Malaysia has responded by banning all North Koreans from leaving their country. So,
and that's all over the death of the half-brother, right?
That's correct. So in addition to the missiles flying, which was a 4-missile barrage, a very nice tactical test of what would be basically a military opening round, the North Koreans certainly seem to be trying to start something with somebody, almost anybody. They're not on China's happy list either, and of course we've got an exercise ongoing in South Korea at the moment. In addition to the new THAAD anti-missile system arriving in Osan, it appears, at least from the initial blush, that a 4-missile barrage, in this case they were long-range Scuds, would potentially defeat the single battery that we have at Osan. So don't be too surprised if the game gets upped and we start seeing either Aegis-armed warships or additional THAAD units being moved to South Korea.
Do you think it's conceivable that there will be a coup within North Korea?
That is possible. The Chinese have apparently had second thoughts about the North Korean regime, obviously by imposing a ban on importation of North Korean coal, which is a major export for the North Koreans. And there was a number of people who were speculating that the brother, Kim Jong-nam, was potentially part of a Chinese, at least, threat to overthrow Kim Jong-un, because he had met in Beijing repeatedly over the holiday season with a number of high-ranking members in Beijing, as well as the Chinese People's Liberation Army, several of the generals.
All right, Charles, we're going to be in touch with you because I have a feeling this is going to break loose. This is a very tense story, folks. I've got to tell you, you know the way my gut is, and I've been pretty accurate for years. Something's going to happen there. It's going to be a test of the Trump administration, to be sure, regardless of all this other stuff that's going on with wiretaps and Russians and things like that. North Korea is a tinderbox, and it's about ready to explode. And we cannot permit this whack job to continue testing his missiles. He's got nukes. All he needs is the payload ability to get them here or to get them somewhere. And he's getting them. He's very close to Japan. He could probably hit Japan now. Something is going to happen. Write that on the calendar. I said it tonight. General Motors is laying off 1,100 workers in Michigan. That's not good news. The fourth layoff it's announced since November. The company is eliminating the third shift of its Lansing Delta Township plant, which makes 3 SUVs built on the same platform. House Republicans have released the text of their long-awaited Obamacare replacement bill, proposing to eliminate the various taxes and penalties tied to the original legislation while still preserving certain patient protections. I would hope they would do that. The more time you spend staring at your smartphone, scrolling through Facebook, trolling on Twitter, snapping on Snapchat, the lonelier you're prone to feel, according to researchers. A national study on young adults found that frequent use of social media might be associated with increased feelings of isolation. Well, you know how I hate clowns. In the Pittsburgh area, extra police are patrolling cities there after 2 men with weapons dressed as clowns frightened a group of children. Police from West Milford and the city of Pittsburgh went searching for the men. As soon as the father of 3 of the children called 911, the search did not turn up any evidence. But what else is going on? Let's check in with astronomer Stephen Cates. Dr. Sky, what a week it's starting off, Stephen.
Wow, George, so many exciting news stories, and some interesting and perilous. But we begin our short journey through time and space here. We're talking about the first woman in space. Russian Valentina Tereshkova turns 80 today. And until now, most of us were told, George, that this mission that she had was flawless back in 1963. But recently, in some of her memoirs, she's written this, and I find it interesting. Her spacecraft was actually pushed too far out into space, and if it weren't for her and some very smart ground controllers, she might have perished in space. She made 48 orbits of the Earth in 3 days, all this back on June the 16th of 1963. Vladimir Putin, of course, honored her today with a special painting. Her call sign was like a seagull, and he did a beautiful painting. He didn't, but somebody gave her that. But something very interesting. She's one of 4 female Russian cosmonauts to have ever gone into space. Svetlana Savitskaya, of course, followed her back in 1982. Interesting news from space. But in the live sky, George, the stuff that the listeners tell me they love so much, you mentioned before, this has been a very interesting month. March is usually one of the better months for sky watchers all through the listening audience. You'll notice, folks, the next few days that the moon continues to race on to its full phase. That happens on Sunday. Magically, this is the full worm moon as many parts of the nation start to warm up and things start to grow again. But something that everybody should take a look at, I'm looking at it right now from my Phoenix location, the planet Jupiter, now rising around 10 p.m. George local time, right in the southeastern sky. And if you have an opportunity to get a small telescope out there now, you're going to see this. The planet Jupiter with the red spot moving a little to the left of center on the planet. On the left side, George, the satellites Io and Ganymede are very close together. You can see them on the left side with south at the bottom. And that mysterious satellite Europa just to the right side of Jupiter, and Callisto all to the right. Jupiter now is some 428 million miles away. The Juno spacecraft continues to work flawlessly. And, George, Jupiter will become the most dominant planet in the late evening into morning. Venus still beautiful into the west, cascading in toward the sun. If you get a telescope or binoculars, it looks like a tiny crescent moon. And above all, always remember to keep your eyes to the skies.
Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate it. Up next, Dr. Bruce Goldberg, as we talk about reincarnation, ancient civilizations, and past lives. Next on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. Dr. Bruce Goldberg with us, of course. He is an expert on hypnotherapy, time travel, reincarnation, you name it. He's got it. Here's Dr. Bruce Goldberg. Dr. Bruce, I want to thank you, first of all. Mel Gibson canceled late notice, could not make it tonight, and you stepped in, and I appreciate that, my friend.
Well, George, excuse me, George. I will always be happy to fill in. I hope you can bear with my voice tonight. I'm overcoming the last part of a cold.
Oh, yeah, we'll get by. We're not straining you, are we?
No, that's okay. I'm here, always here for you. I want to thank you for your kind introduction and also for your kind review of my Exploring the Fifth Dimension book, where you describe it as Dr. Goldberg guides you into a world beyond your wildest expectations. Highly recommended. As we discuss the ancient civilizations with past life regression as the source of the information, what it brings up is a very important concept, and that is that when you explore past lives and you deal with reincarnation, you overcome the fear of death. The number one fear people have when they reach their 55 plus. So reincarnation shows that the soul is permanent and eternal, and that the physical body, although respected, is only a temporary vehicle.
You know, Bruce, you and I have been chatting, interviewing for at least 13 years now on incredible stories dealing with past lives, reincarnation. I'm convinced at this point now, especially after talking to you all these years, that reincarnation is the real thing. And what's so fascinating is a lot of psychotherapists and people like that are coming forward with cases of little kids, for example, and they're convinced that past life regression works and that something is to it. Isn't that remarkable?
Well, yes, it gives what we call suggestive evidence. You're never going to prove reincarnation. There are too many alternative hypotheses, true. But in science, we use the term suggestive evidence, which means that, well, one of the best examples is my Search for Grace case that was made into a TV movie based on my book of the same name, in which the network documented a case of a woman who was regressed into 46 past lives. In 20 of them, she was killed by the same guy. I call him Johnny. And she came to me to get over that relationship. Here's a woman who was being literally stalked and attempted murder 3 different times, and she couldn't break up with the gentleman. I use that term loosely. And she was a very well-educated, very sophisticated woman. So these are just examples. The James Laniger case that we've discussed before many times
great case.
is a good example of the World War II case where this little child in 2000 was giving spontaneous information of a World War II pilot describing the planes in detail at the age of about 3. You know, they don't talk about that on Saturday morning cartoons. You know, I mean, he has the same first name. He looked like the guy. I mean, he had infinite, or shall we say, very detailed information about the flying of a plane. That, you know, a 3-year-old kid doesn't have that. So, but today, people either believe or they don't. I don't really care. I'm not trying to prove anything to anyone. I'm a clinician. Yes, I have documented cases. In Grace cases, one of them is my best. But my purpose here is to use hypnosis and past life therapy as a subset of it to help people overcome the fear of death, to help them to attain goals, to cure them, or let's just say to train them to cure themselves is the better way of putting it, of various elements, everything from depression to medical issues. And but today we're going to be doing this on a kind of a historical thing here because this is cool. This is where we're going to discuss 3 ancient civilizations. Now listen to these, and I'm going to give you case histories for these 2. One is going to be the ancient civilization from the ancient continent of Lemuria, which is also known as Mu, in the Pacific Ocean, a gigantic continent.
Was that near Atlantis, or is it one of the same?
No. Lemuria is in the Pacific Ocean. I'll give you the reference points when I discuss it as far as what are the current remnants of Lemuria. So I'll get to that in a moment.
All right.
Then we're going to discuss Atlantis, of course, which was Mu's first major conquest as a civilization in expanding an empire. And then we're going to discuss Egypt before the flood. This is going to be fun, okay?
I remember when you did a sci-fi show with me many moons ago, we had a woman on that you past life regressed, and she was from Egypt, if I recall.
Yes,
You remember that?
Yeah, she was a princess, like in Egypt, and she was, and it was explaining some of her personality traits and problems that she has now. Because one of the things you learn from past life regression is there are karmic carryovers. There are traits of yours, talents as well as traits, and of course group karma, people that you know now. If it's an important or significant emotional relationship, whether it be love or hate, by the way, you're most likely going to have a karmic connection with them in a past life, or many of them. The problem is the search for Gray's case illustrates the most common situation of what we call a retribution soulmate. In other words, if you knew somebody, whether it be a wife or a husband, or whether it's a father figure or a child or an employer or a producer, okay, sorry, Tom, anyone in your life that causes you problems or whatever, you can guarantee that it's a past life connection. So my purpose is to help people get over that, not just to, sometimes I don't even recommend couples. They say, I'd like to know we know each other past life, but they have problems. And I say, look, the last thing you want to see is how your husband or wife 500 years ago cheated on you, stole your money, abandoned you.
Or whatever they did.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not going to be a happy ending. If they've got problems now, which most of the people come to me have.
So they carry over, don't they?
Right. And it's going to be with the same people. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to begin discussing, this is something you don't hear much about. There aren't many books written about Lemuria. There are thousands of them written on Atlantis. But not Lemuria.
That's true. And let me get your website out, by the way,
Okay,
Bruce.
yeah, and also because of your kind review of my book, I'm going to renew my offer to your listeners. If they order Exploring the Fifth Dimension directly from my site or my toll-free number, the 1-800-KARMA-4U, or 1-800-527-6248, they will get an autographed copy of the book plus a free CD called Fifth Dimensional Travel, which will take them out of the body into the fifth dimension. One of the ways you can explore past lives is going into the fifth dimension. The website is DR, that's D as in David, R as in Robert, BruceGoldberg.com. And if your listeners do not have a computer for whatever reason and they want to get the exercise without buying the book, but please, only if they don't have a computer, just call my toll-free number, and my secretary will deal with it, and just simply say, you don't have a computer, but you want the free exercise, right, and she will send you a packet with the free exercise, and the first 200 callers will get the access to the Akashic Record exercise to go along with the fifth dimensional travel. And all these exercises are on my homepage, on my site. People who have computers. There's videos on there. There's Beyond Belief clips, from your show. That's on there. And
I had fun doing that.
And so let me talk about Lemuria. Lemuria, or Mu, was a continent in the Pacific Ocean stretching 6,000 miles from east to west and about 3,000 miles north to south. This today encompasses what we would call the Hawaiian Islands, Fiji, Easter Island, the Marianas, and the South Pacific Islands we find today. So there's your reference point about where it was.
Okay.
It was a gigantic continent. It's bigger than the United States. Mu was the true Garden of Eden that produced modern man. It was the seat of a rather advanced civilization, as we'll see. The population of this ancient continent was over 64 million people, most of which perished when the gas belt underlying much of the earth collapsed on the continent, resulting in the sinking of both not only Atlantis but Mu itself. The last time was about 11,000 BC. Both these continents, by the way, went down 3 times, 50,000 BC, 26,000 BC, and the last time was 11,000 BC. So there were third time, going under for the third time. I think that's where the expression came from. Mu also had centers of what we call temples of wisdom, where people would be educated, like a university. They also had healing temples in which all citizens would be exposed to energy-level techniques, of which I use in my practice today, to heal them of various issues, medical or psychological, as we call them energy issues. Science and technology had advanced to such a stage that the average life expectancy was between 500 and 1,000 years old in Mu.
Jeez. Almost like the Bible.
Right. Well, this is like, Adam, Noah, Methuselah.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Think about that, all right? And think of the time travels in the future. They're going to have a lifespan of between about 500 and 1,000, 900, as I call it. During its early phase, Mu people were between 8 and 10 feet tall. Remember the giants from the old
That's right.
Okay. Later, they evolved to be about 6 to 8 feet tall, okay, which is more relevant today, especially if you play basketball. This is reflected in the Quest of Giants and many ancient legends. Their language was called Sansar, Sansar, and was a symbol-based writing, not unlike the Egyptian hieroglyphics.
Hold on for a second, Bruce. We're already at the bottom. We're going to take a quick break. Go get yourself a little hot tea, rest that voice, because we're going to put you to work tonight for a couple hours. I'm George Norrie, Dr. Bruce Goldberg with us right here on Coast to Coast AM's website, linked up at coasttocoastam.com. With Dr. Bruce Goldberg as we talk about past lives and ancient civilizations. And next hour, we'll take phone calls with Dr. Bruce right here on Coast to Coast AM. Welcome back to Coast, Dr. Bruce Goldberg, as we talk about these ancient civilizations and their amazing past lives of what happened there. Lemuria, Mu. Let's go back to that, Bruce.
I was talking about it being more like a Garden of Eden. Now, what happened was they were established about 200,000 BC. Now, around 125,000 BC, two major groups appeared in Mu. One was, these were the beginning of the explorers, or the Maya, M-A-Y-A as it's called. One group was called the Essenes, E-S-S-E-N-E-S. They were very spiritual and functioned as a keeper of the records. They stored their records in these great crystals, by the way.
They did the Dead Sea Scrolls, right?
Well, except it's a little bit different. They stored them in crystals, and remember, Atlantis was known for its crystals, as we'll discuss shortly. The other group is called the Atlantes, and they were much more of the materialistic and warlike. And notice the name Atlantes. That name would be used to establish their first major colony in about 75,000 BC, which was called Atlantis in the Atlantic Ocean. Okay, Mu also, when they expanded as an empire, almost like the British, the sun never sets on the British Empire routine. They expanded into Babylonia, the Mayans in North America, in Central America. Egypt was also part of the expansion. Now, Egypt is interesting because the northern part of Egypt, which we call Lower Egypt, was settled by Atlantis. The southern part of Egypt, which was called Upper Egypt, because the Nile flows from south to north, was settled by the Lemurians, or Mu. So that's important because they had a major civil war there for thousands of years. Okay, so what happened is that the India was also a major settlement of Mu, and they would ship things to people and supplies, etc., to India, and then use that India route to eventually go to Upper Egypt, the southern part of Egypt, when they established the Egyptian civilization. We're going to discuss Egypt shortly too, before the flood. So I want to give a case history for Mu. This is an interesting one. In my career of seeing over maybe 18,000 patients, totaling a lot of decades, I've only had one patient who ever had a future life as a time traveler, and this is the patient I'm going to describe.
Okay.
His future life in about the 36th century is a man named Kamar, K-A-M-A-R, and his mission was to go back in time to solve the problem of the electric wars of prehistory. Now, let me show you what this is. This is very interesting. The electric wars are a turf battle in Mu and Atlantis that lasted nearly 50 years. And whenever there were light flashes and pulsations were observed, this indicated an interdimensional interference had taken place. And many of these ETs were involved that would eventually come into travel interdimensionally, or just trying to attack the Earth and take it over. One group was called the Lyrans. The Lyrans were very selfish, power-hungry, dogmatic, and they controlled Atlantis. The other group was the Syrians, which are the good guys here, and they helped us to actually save us from the domination of the Lyrans. The Lyrans came here first by several 100,000 years, so the Syrians always had to, shall you say, play catch-up. Well, eventually, Kamar and the ETs, and some of the select ETs, were able to negotiate a peace between the Atlantes and the Essenes, as well as the ET groups. Now, the reason why the electric wars were significant was because these electric wars were based upon trying to control human beings. In other words, they had something called impulse codes. This manifested a three-dimensional distortion of reality to unsuspecting humans, even without conscious awareness or permission. This technique is coded into the memory so that past experiences can be wiped out and absolute total brainwashing scenarios could be substituted. This is beyond mere suggestions or hallucinations. It's an actual alternation of the DNA and neurological systems of the individual. So it's pretty heavy. Even the time travelers themselves, with their advanced technology, could not change that without going through the ETs and some of the other techniques. Eventually, war was ended, peace was settled, and people started to play nice again. But that was Mu. So Mu was Mu was a very interesting civilization, and really the beginning of really modern man, so to speak. And by the way, anthropologists today will tell you that Homo sapien, our species, began 200,000 years ago. So isn't that interesting? Okay?
Well, Michael Cremo would say even farther back.
Yes, and Michael's an old friend, dear sweet guy. I love Michael. Atlantis now, I want to discuss them.
All right.
Atlantis was the most important colony and the first major colony of Mu, but it became an uncontrollable antagonist. The Atlantes from Mu degenerated into materialistic and warlike people. The East Indian scriptures, or the Mahabharata, which I've quoted many times before, talks about a nuclear war in India, which was really an Atlantis or Lemuria fight, basically, using nuclear weapons, okay? Atlantis had these power airships called Valix.
When you first left, couldn't make it through 1 hour without thinking of you. Hated giving you that power, but as time went on, I kept getting that much stronger. Now I can't go without a tear for half a day or longer. Some you win, and some you lose, and some just leave you lonely and confused. But now it only hurts at night, when I'm lying alone in the darkness, wondering why you were so heartless. Now